see you, sunrise. Finally here at last. How long have I waited for you? How long have I waited for this exact moment? Grandma, please be with me. Guide me on what is to come.
It started off as such a small thing at first. A sliver of light that started to bleed up from the ocean. The light grew brighter, and soon the ocean became bathed in dazzling sparkles. As soon as Rin saw it, the wild desire that she had carefully cultivated for years finally awoke. It was finally time for her dreams, hopes, and longings to be manifested. Rin smiled as the moisture built up in her eyes. A myriad of oranges, pinks, and yellows streaked across the horizon, pushing back the seemingly infinite expanse of the previous night. She had only recently turned 20 years old, and was of average height and body type for women of the Shanado tribe of the Aoela people. Rin's long black hair blew along with the wind that zipped over the beach. Her dark brown eyes locked on the horizon, and she stared at an unknown location, somewhere out there, beyond sight. She wore a light blue top that slightly exposed her midriff, and a tan brown skirt that ended at her knee.
Will I be enough? Am I strong enough to be like you?
Rin formed a small fist and held it at the center of her chest. She drew in another deep breath, and then closed her eyes as the sounds of the ocean, slapping against the shore, cascaded all around her. Whenever the weight of the world threatened to crush her, the loving harmony of the waves soothed her. That was a personal ritual her grandmother used to do, and so Rin had adopted the same practice. The telltale sound of footsteps in the sand cut through the rhythm of the sea. She focused on that sound and noted it was a single person walking toward her instead of three. Prickly anxiousness began eating away at her calm demeanor.
You know, you don't really have to do this, right? There are so many people who don't, and they're just as great as Grandma.
Rin drew in another calming breath.
No one is as great as Grandma was. And I don't care about what other people do with their lives. This is something I have to do. My whole life has been sailing toward this experience, and at this moment, I am trying to gather myself. Would you mind?
You only think you have to do this because Grandma did it. The voyage is the most dangerous thing you might ever do.
Rin let out a huff, and she pivoted to face her older brother, Lycos. He was taller than she was, which was typical of most males of their tribe. Lycos was a slender man, with long, dark brown hair that was tied into a man bun on the back of his head. His light brown eyes bored holes into Rin, and she stared right back. Lycos wore a light brown skirt, much like the one that Rin wore.
Well, if it's the most dangerous thing I could ever do, then it's good that I'm getting it out of the way so soon, isn't it? I don't care what you think. I'm doing this, and you can't stop me. As soon as Masita, Dwayana, and Osibu come, we're going to get on our canoe, and then we're gone. Once I get back, I'll tell you about all the things you're too scared to go see for yourself.
I'm not scared. I'm perfectly content with what we have here. The sea around our home has more fish than our people could ever eat. Sunrises and sunsets are just as beautiful as they are anywhere else.
How would you know? You've never left the Shinado Islands.
Well, neither have you.
Yes, that's why I'm going, you big dummy. If you're content with what we have here, then that's wonderful. I'm really happy for you. But me? I need more. I need to push myself and see the places that Grandma told us about. I need to taste the air of a place that's beyond the horizon. I need to smell the sea from a distant location. I know the pieces of who I'm supposed to be are out there. I have to find them.
But it's dangerous. There are going to be storms and waves and sharks.
I don't care how dangerous it is. I have to go. Please, Lycos, unclench your heart and have faith in me.
From just to the left of Lycos' shoulder, Rin noticed a single figure strolling on the beach, heading toward them. Rin's stomach dropped as she stepped past Lycos, moving toward Masita. Masita was a couple inches taller than Rin, but still shorter than Lycos. She had long, dark brown hair and a pair of darker brown eyes. Usually, Masita beamed smiles that rivaled even the most radiant sunrises. However, at the moment, she was frowning, and her eyebrows hung low over her eyes. Masita wore a light pink top and a darker brown-colored skirt. She stopped about 3 feet from Rin, and she gazed toward the edge of the sand where it kissed the grass line.
Where are Aoela and Osibu?
Well, you see, they aren't coming.
What do you mean they aren't coming?
They said they both know how important this is to you, but they feel that the voyage is too dangerous for them.
For a long moment, Rin let her eyes go unfocused, and moisture hindered her vision once more. These tears weren't like the ones she had earlier. She whipped around and pointed toward her older brother.
Tell me you didn't! You had better not have convinced my friends to back out at the last moment. I swear on Sudaiba's name,
I didn't! I swear! While I don't want you to go, I would never sabotage you like this. But now you can't go. Not with just the two of you.
I will go alone if I have to. I'm not going to set my dream aside because others are too scared. I can't wait for another 5 years for the next voyage only to have this happen again. I'm still going.
Masita stepped forward and curled her arm with Rin's. A wide smile creased Masita's face, and it was the sort of smirk that warmed Rin's insides.
Do you really think I'd let you face this alone? Even if it is only just the two of us, I'll go with you to the edge of the ocean and back. Don't doubt that for a moment.
I knew you would never falter. Thank you so much for being my very best friend ever. I know with you there, we'll succeed for sure.
Of course we will. Lycos, be a dear and escort us to our canoe so we may begin this fantastic journey.
I bet my parents are waiting for us by the canoe. I wonder if they're going to be like him.
Don't talk about me as if I'm not here. It's natural to be nervous, especially when those you love are sailing into danger.
Aw, Lycos, we're going to be fine. And besides, Wait. Did you say those?
Lycos' cheeks grew a little rosier, and he stormed off past Rin and Masita.
Yes, you'll be fine. Just forget the storms, the sharks, and the savage waves. Fine, she says.
Rin and Masita watched him stomp off in the direction of where Rin's and Masita's canoe was. She only studied her brother a moment longer before she chuckled.
So, do you really think we'll be alright?
We have to be. I mean, this is supposed to be my destiny, right? I'm supposed to go on the voyage of the Great Navigators like my grandma did, aren't I? If not, then why has the mere thought of going been tugging at me ever since I was small?
It's only your destiny if you want it to be, and if you actively chase it.
I do want this. I want it more than anything else in the whole wide world. We will chase it, and we will grasp our destinies so fiercely that even the gods and goddesses will marvel at our feats.
They already do.
Do you really think so? Do you really think they care about someone like me?
To be honest, it doesn't matter what the gods and goddesses care about. What matters is what you care about, what you're willing to do to get it. Now come on, let's go get our canoe before your endearing brother convinces your parents to not let us go.
Oh, we're going.
Masita and Rin moved along the beach with slight haste. Rin's favorite beach was on the other side of her Shanado village, and as they passed, she gave it one last look. Her village was just like any other Shanado tribe community. Wooden huts were clustered together in a large circle around a central raised mound. The central mound was where the chieftain's hut was located, and other important buildings were close to the center as well. Some of those buildings included the seer's hut and the navigator's guild hall. When Rin became an adult at the age of 18, she was gifted with her own hut on the outer circle of the village. Masita was her neighbor. Their canoe was on the northwestern side of the island, while her favorite beach was on the eastern side. This particular island, Owena, was one of 5 islands making up the Shanado Islands. The other 4 islands were named Ki'ihi, Mauyo, Miniyi, and Hauniwa. Lycos leaned against the canoe with his arms crossed over his chest and a frustrated expression painted on his face. Their parents were beside him, and they had been engaged in conversation when Rin and Masita came upon them. Rin's mother, Yonatsu, was just as tall as Rin, and many often confused her for being Rin's older, more mature sister. She had shoulder-length black hair with a pair of light brown eyes. Her mother wore a light blue dress that fell to her kneecaps, with large slits running up the sides for ease of movement. Rin's father, Thenosa, was slightly shorter than Lycos, but taller than Rin. He had more worry lines on his face than her mother, due to his more conservative and cautious nature. Her father had a bit of a gut on him, but that was because he was such a fantastic cook and loved good meals. His black hair was cut short, and his brown eyes radiated with apprehensiveness. For just a moment, Rin's eyes flashed to the tattoo on her father's left forearm. A solid black band was closest to the wrist, and a second band tattoo had been added to the first one. The second tattoo had been adorned with a spear tip pattern, representing the fortitude Voyagers needed to have to complete the voyage of the Great Navigators. However, the tattoo was unfinished and would most likely remain so. Rin and Masita's canoe was a double-hulled canoe, with 2 long pieces of wood side by side and tied together. There was perhaps about 15 feet between the 2 hulls, and a flat piece of wood laid on top of the middle space. A tall mast was at the middle of the vessel, with a sail that was stretched overhead. Beneath the sail was a small hut that resembled a miniature version of the houses of the village. Within the small hut was a tiny cubbyhole to store water, food, and supplies. The inside was large enough for 4 people to sleep side by side. A rudder was at the back of the canoe. Just as Rin had expected, her father's face had scrunched up when only Masita and Rin arrived.
Wait, where are your friends? The other 2? Takejo's boys. What were their names again, honey?
Duayana and Osibu.
Yes, where are they? Why are they not here yet? They are coming, aren't they?
They backed out at the last moment, Father.
Both of their parents glanced toward Lycos briefly, before looking back at Rin and Masita.
They backed out.
You 2 aren't going to go alone, are you?
Rin inhaled to speak, but her father held his head in his hands.
No, you can't go. It's too dangerous.
Father, I have to go. I've wanted this my whole life. I don't care about the danger. Masita and I will face it and overcome it.
But just the 2 of you.
Not 2, 3.
Rin's eyes darted over to her older brother, who leaned on the beached canoe. Her heart whirled within her and was submerged in a slithering warmth.
What?
Yeah. What? You said before you didn't want me to go.
Lycos shifted his attention over to Rin.
I don't want you to go, but you're doing it anyway. You'll just sail off with Masita to face the fury of Ototala, Sudaiba, and maybe even Yongondo. With only 2 of you, it will be crazy dangerous. Maybe with 3 of us, it will be less dangerous.
The waves kept washing upon the shore with continuous dedication, and its calming melody filled the expanse of the silence between them all. The warmth in Rin's chest grew more enveloping, and yet her words died on her lips.
Aw, Lycos. You big sweetheart.
Rin's mother walked over to Lycos and hugged him tightly.
May Sudaiba bless you for your good heart, my son. Be nice to your sister.
Mother, I will be. I'm 23. I'm not a kid anymore.
So that's it then. Both my children are just going off beyond the edge of the horizon then.
Rin stepped forward and hugged her father tightly. His arms wrapped around her within seconds.
Promise me that you will look after one another, and that you both will return home. Please.
I promise I'll keep Lycos safe.
Whatever. We'll see who's gonna keep who safe.
He turned around and started pushing the canoe with all of his strength. It started to budge a little.
Oh, look at Mr. Tough Guy. Come on, scooch over, you silly man.
Masita started pushing too. Meanwhile, Rin's mother walked over and hugged Rin from the other side, and great heat blasted into her body from both sides.
I know you have to do this. We're both proud of you. We love you so much.
You're definitely your grandma's grandkid. I love you. I wish I could have finished.
Ren reached up and pressed a finger onto her father's lips.
No, don't. We each have our own horizons we have to cross. You chose yours, and you lived an awesome life. You sailed past your own horizons, and now it's time for me to sail past mine.
I am so blessed to have had you two as my kids. Lycos, you're a great man. I'm proud of you too, son. I'll tell the fish warden you'll be gone for a while.
The canoe was in the shallow parts of the water. Masita was on the canoe.
Yeah. Thanks, Father. If you don't stop lingering, we're going to leave you behind.
It's true. I really think he might do it.
Rin stepped away from her parents, beamed the biggest smile she could muster at them, and then she ran to stand beside Lycos. She placed her hands on the edge of the canoe.
Get on. I'll push it out.
No, this is my dream. Why would I let you steal any of it away from me? Taking these first steps and pushing our canoe out to sea, it's a part of the process. In fact, you get on. I'll push you out.
I can
Now!
Lycos groaned a little, and then he hopped onto the canoe.
Oh, hi. I'm so glad you could join me up here.
Rin took another deep breath, and she started to push the canoe deeper into the water. Once she was waist-high deep in the water, she pulled herself up onto the canoe. Lycos opened the sail, and the canoe started to move forward. Rin turned back to see her parents, both of whom held one another as they watched them leave.
Don't worry. I'll keep them both very safe.
Bless you, Masita!
Rin licked her lips as the consistent wind blew against her face. She drew in a deep breath and engulfed herself in the freshness of the open ocean. The sunlight twinkled on the surface of the water, which rippled wildly. To her great delight, the edge of the horizon was an unbroken boundary between the sea and the sky. When she turned back to gaze behind them, their home had been swallowed. However, amidst all of her excitement, there existed a small throbbing mass. Her eyes fell upon Lycos, who also stared back toward the Shenandoah Islands.
Lycos, we need to talk.
Masita exited the small hut where their provisions were, and she beamed a wincing expression at her. Maybe this wasn't the best way to start a journey, but unfortunately, it was the one set before Rin. Lycos shifted his stance and also looked at her with a guarded set of eyes.
Do we? And what do we need to talk about? You got your way. You're getting to go. You won.
This isn't about winning. This is about safeguarding my right to determine my own destiny in the way that best suits me. Participating in the Voyage of the Great Navigators will change me for the better, and well, Please don't ruin this for me.
Ruin this for you? And what do you mean by that? I came on this trip to make sure you were safe.
First of all, this isn't a trip. This is the Voyage of the Great Navigators. It's sacred. I'm not doing this because it's going to be fun. I'm doing this because it's going to change me.
Why do you think you need to change? There's nothing wrong with you! There's nothing wrong with home!
There doesn't have to be something wrong with me to need this. And it's more than just a need. I want to change. I want to be tested. This isn't going to be safe. It's meant to be tough.
You always seem to focus on the best and brightest parts of Grandma's stories. Yes, she overcame the voyage and became a great navigator, but you're forgetting some important details. You're forgetting that Grandma left the island with her best friends, but she finished the voyage alone.
A sour coconut-sized lump began tormenting Rin from the inside of her stomach.
I have not forgotten that. Never once. It's something that dances at the back of my mind, but I don't care. I would rather be like them and risk it all doing what I love, rather than end up
Rin bit her lower lip and finally turned her face away.
Rather than end up like Father? You don't want to end up being a coward, is that it? You don't want people to look at you the way they look at him?
I know what I want out of life. I know that I have to go on the voyage no matter what happens. In the end, I can say I lived. If you're going to just lecture me and treat me like Father does, then I don't want you going.
Rin, you can be so reckless sometimes. Do you remember when you were 14? That storm nearly killed you. Had Father and I not seen you from the shore and come to get you, you would have drowned under that sinking canoe. Remember when you were 16? But it didn't matter that your arm was broken. A week later, you were doing more crazy stuff.
What's your point? Yeah, sometimes I'm a little brash, but you need to have boldness to be a Voyager. All the Great Navigators say so. Grandma said it all the time.
Well, Grandma also said you needed to have intelligence, too. All the boldness in the world isn't going to help you if you get yourself killed.
Are you saying I'm stupid? You're...
Enough! Both of you! Stop it!
In an instant, the words on Rin's lips died. Masita stepped between the pair of them, and she held out her hands as if they were about to charge one another. Maybe it appeared that way. Had they been yelling?
You both need to calm down, okay? If we're going to successfully survive the voyage, then we need to be able to rely on one another. Now, Rin, as your best friend, I'm obligated to tell you that you do, in fact, act recklessly sometimes.
Excuse me, but you were right beside me during each and every one of those reckless times.
Yes, which is exactly why we need him here to keep us from going overboard. I love you, Rin, but you know that sometimes even we get in over our heads.
I guess so.
He is not wrong. We do need to act with a little more caution. There will be times for boldness, and there will be times when we need to be like him. Boring.
Oh, so now it's boring to be safe?
Lycos is one of the best sailors on our island. He can give us a different perspective, and he's also another person to steer the canoe while we're sleeping. And as for you...
Masita spun around and pointed a finger in Lycos' face.
Rin is right. Voyages are meant to be dangerous. They are meant to challenge Voyagers so they can become great navigators. It's one thing to be careful, but being too cautious will impede the growth that your sister is so urgently seeking. Can you understand why this is so important to her?
I can understand. Can you understand why I'm so nervous for you? I love you, and I don't want you to not come back. Father quit going on his voyage because he knew the path of the Great Navigator wasn't for him. And I recognize it's the path you select for yourself.
It really is. I promise I'll be as careful as I can, but I have to go.
Then I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you both get back home. I may not like it, but sometimes you have to adapt to what life throws at you.
Someone's already working on their Mer People Island tattoo.
Masita placed her hands on her hips, and she smiled broadly.
And the day was saved by me! Yay, go me! You're the greatest.
Rin stepped forward and wrapped her best friend in a hug.
Yeah, sometimes you are. And then other times...
Sometimes you're the worst. How long is it going to take for us to get to the sacred island of New Beginnings?
3.5 days. Soon, the real adventure begins.
Wow! There are so many.
Yes, so many. And they're just like us.
When the island first came into view, Rin couldn't contain her overpowering elation. Arriving at the sacred island of New Beginnings was just the first step. However, as they got closer, a great sense of awe dominated her. Hundreds of young people had come to the island to participate in the voyage and to earn their tattoos. Dozens of canoes of all shapes, sizes, and designs rested on the beach where what looked like hundreds of Aoela were moving about. Some of the soon-to-be Voyagers were by their canoes, and others were being directed by individuals wearing interesting headdresses with multicolored feathers on them. As they got closer to the shore, Rin was able to see the headdresses in greater detail. They were composed of headbands with feathers woven into the tops of them, making them look like glorious crowns.
There's a spot over there!
There was a large open spot between two canoes, further down the beach. Lycos steered the canoe over to it. When the water was shallow enough, Rin and Lycos got out and guided their canoe onto the sand. They had just finished pushing their canoe fully onto dry land when one of the people wearing the headdresses came up to them. He was a portly man with bright blue eyes. The man's smile was quite inviting. A completed Great Navigator tattoo was on his right arm, going from his wrist to his elbow.
Welcome to the sacred island of New Beginnings. We are happy to see so many brave souls to venture on the voyage this year. The gods and goddesses will also rejoice, surely. My name is Jamati, a humble servant of the Voyage. Where are you all from?
Hi, I'm Rin. This is my best friend Masita, and that is my brother Lycos. We're from the Shanado tribe.
Oh, the Shanado. That tribe always provides more voyagers than the other Aoela nations. So, now that you're here, let me tell you where to go. Please follow where the other voyagers are headed, and you will be shown to Voyagers' village. There, you will receive your first tattoo, marking you as Voyagers. The opening ceremony will occur in 2 days, as to allow the remainder of those interested time to get here. Best of luck to all of you, and may the gods and goddesses smile upon you.
Rin, Lycos, and Masita followed along with the crowd. Some of the faces in the crowd were familiar, and many of them had the Shanado tribe look to them. A dozen or more Voyagers were much taller than everyone else, and it was easy to guess where they came from. They had to have been from the Valdo tribe. A wide smile creased Rin's face as she glanced over to Masita, who was right beside her. Her best friend shared her delight. The path they walked on led further inland on the island, and then it stopped at a large collection of tents. Voyager candidates formed a line where a few more of the servants of the voyage were gathered. The Voyagers checked in and then were directed to specific tents as teams. As soon as Rin, Masita, and Lycos got to their tent, Another servant of the Voyage came up to them and told them when they could expect the tattoo artists to come by. They were instructed to wait until they received their first Voyage tattoos. And so they did. Masita was just as visually excited as Rin was. But Lycos sat by himself and his arms were crossed over his chest. A small frown was on his face, and he kept staring at the ground rather than at either Masita or her. Within an hour, a trio of 2 older men and 1 woman came into the tent, carrying tattooing tools and ink. Rin smiled widely until the sharp point of the tools pierced her skin. Pain shot up her nerves, but she dared not protest. In all of her fanciful dreamings, she never once considered how it would feel to actually get the tattoos. She clenched her jaws tightly and kept breathing in and out loudly, which earned some bemused chuckles from the tattoo artists. To distract Rin and perhaps herself as well, Masita started talking about the other Aoela they had seen from the other tribes. Tears were in Masita's eyes, and her voice was a little shaky. Lycos just kept quiet, but even he had a tightened set of jaws and twitching eyes. It didn't take long to finish, and when it was completed, Rin had a solid black band around her right wrist. Masita had one on her right as well, while Lycos had one on his left wrist. As soon as the tattoo artists left, Rin and Masita stood up and stretched. Lycos, on the other hand, remained seated where he had been resting, and he gazed intently at his tattoo. Masita glanced at Rin and then shrugged her shoulders.
So, hey, we're going to walk around for a while. See you later?
Right. See you later.
Masita and Rin walked out of the tent and they chose a direction. After a while of walking, Masita stopped, which caused Rin to do so as well.
So, he's not taking this whole life transformation experience as good as us.
I can understand why. He didn't want this. Not like us. Maybe this is all too much for him. Should we send him home? Do you think he's going to be okay on a journey like this?
Says a woman who's also never gone on a journey like this. He decided to come and protect you, so let him. We're both excited because we've been mentally preparing ourselves for the immense pressure of the voyage.
And he's just now coming to terms with it. Getting that tattoo makes it real for him. Do you think he's going to give up, like my father?
Psh, no. He may be sulking now, but he's gonna see it through. That's just the kind of man he is. Do you think you're going to give it up like your father?
Never. I'm going to be a Great Navigator.
Another feminine voice cut through the air, like the rays of sunlight after a storm.
Aha! That's just what I expect from my rival.
Rin and Masita turned toward the source of the voice. A Shanado woman emerged from a nearby tent, and she stood in the entryway. She was the same height as Rin, with a slightly bigger head, a slightly smaller waist, and bigger feet. She probably inherited her feet and her head from her father. Guahana had shoulder-length black hair and a pair of light brown eyes, almost like honey. She wore a brown skirt and a red top.
Hey, you made it! I'm glad. I was hoping you would. Are your minions here too?
Yeah, they're back in the tent. We kinda pushed ourselves a little too hard on the way here, and so they crashed as soon as we got our tattoos. I was about to take a long nap too when I heard you. I see your crony is with you. Where are the 2 goons?
Wow, such a biting wit. And as for the goons...
They decided the voyage was too dangerous and didn't come.
Oh no, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. You 2 didn't come here just the 2 of you, did you?
No, Rin's brother Lycos decided to join us at the last moment.
Your brother Lycos is here? Oh, I'd trade all my minions for him. Don't tell them I said that. He's just so gorgeous.
Okay, gross. We're going to be okay. Lycos is an excellent sailor. I'm really knowledgeable about star charting and navigating, and Masita, well,
I lift their spirits and keep them motivated. We all have important roles to play.
Speaking of lifting spirits up, have you seen, well, them yet?
Them? Them who?
The mermaids and mermen. By Aoeda's brightness, they are something else. As handsome as Lycos is, the mermen are so dreamy. And in your case, the mermaids are pretty beautiful too. So you get to drool over both of them.
Whatever, I'm sure I won't drool. But they're here? Why? To watch us sail out?
No, to participate in the voyage too! They have these strange sails that come out of the water and, oh, you'll have to just see it for yourself. It's fascinating.
Guahana pointed further down the path.
Head down that way and then head toward the beach. You can't miss them. As for me, I feel the weariness from the trip hitting me harder. I'm going to take a nap. Be safe. And, well, I hope to see you on the Voldo Islands after this.
Yeah, I definitely want to see what you're talking about. You be safe too.
Guahana walked back in the tent, and Rin started to stroll toward the mysterious spot where the mer people were. But then she noticed Masita hadn't moved.
Are you coming? Don't you want to see the mer people?
Actually, a nap sounds lovely. Besides, I've seen the Siratasi before. Maybe I can cheer up Mr. Grumpy Skirt. Tell me about it when you get back, though.
Masita walked back in the direction of their tent, and Rin couldn't help but watch her go.
The what?
Of all the paths he had imagined for himself, this was not one of them. What was he even doing? Lycos wandered through the avenues between the tents, walking at a lazy pace. He kept his eyes downcast and he walked in the center as to not bump into anyone. For as long as he could remember, Lycos simply wanted to lead a simple life, one that lacked all of the dangerous intrigue that his grandma's stories contained. Once upon a time, he had been like Rin, eager to breach the horizon and discover the mysteries of the world. However, upon the revelation of the deaths of his grandma's friends, well, it sapped away any such longing. And yet, despite his aversion, here he was. Lycos swallowed hard as he pondered once more. What was he even doing here? Protecting Rin and Masita so they could come back home. A feathery sort of lightness danced in his chest when he thought about the pair of them. He gripped his fists as he turned a corner at an intersection. Within all that doubt, a small ember flickered with constant determination. No matter what, he would see that they came back. A large figure stepped out from the tent, just as Lycos was crossing the threshold. His face collided with her meaty, muscular shoulder, and his hands went forward to brace himself. Lycos touched and then gripped a forearm as he was falling back.
Hey, don't worry, little brother. I gotcha.
The figure Lycos bumped into was a gargantuan woman, towering over him, with broad shoulders, powerful biceps, thick forearms and thighs. She had bushy black hair tied into a ponytail and a pair of soft brown eyes. The large woman reached out with her other hand and gripped Lycos' shoulder. He didn't fall, and the woman steadied him back on his feet.
You alright, little brother? It would be a shame if you got hurt before we even start the voyage.
I'm fine, and I'm not your little brother.
The woman placed a hand on her hip and she grinned from ear to ear. Other very large Aoela emerged from the same tent as she did, and they all peered at Lycos with curiosity.
What is this little guy's problem, eh?
Why are you so sour, little brother? You bumped into me. If one little near fall is going to upset ya, you might not want to go on the voyage. I can tell you aren't tough enough. Ya should go back home. Where are you from? Panatu? Isiba?
I was walking in the center of the path. It's not my fault you're as big as the volcano. You bumped into me. You must be from the Valdo tribe. I'm from the Shanado tribe. And you know what? I am plenty tough enough to go on the voyage. In fact, I might be even tougher than you.
Ho ho, taller than me, eh? Listen to this little Shanado. Big talk, eh? You're right, we are from the Voldo Islands. I'm Utamaka. And what is your name?
Lycos. And it's not big talk. I'm one of the best fishermen on my island. I can withstand whatever the voyage throws at me.
Oh, a fisherman. I like your spirit and I like your name, but I like little Shanado better. You just said you might be tougher than me. That is something I would like to see for myself.
Wait, what do you mean? Like, right here, right now?
No, not now. But how about once we get to the Voldo Islands? There, we can have a real old-fashioned Voldo test of toughness. You challenge me, little Shanado, and I accept.
I didn't challenge you, I was just...
No. You did, and I told you already. I accept. You can't change it now, little Shanado. You and I have a test of toughness on the Voldo Islands. It's fate. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're hungry. See you later, little brother.
Utamaka passed by him, and she patted his head as she did so. He tried to swat her hand away, but that made her laugh all the more. The other Valdo Voyagers walked past him too, but they all bumped him to the side with their bigger bodies.
See you later, little brother. That is, if you even make it to the Voldo Islands.
Lycos watched the large Voyagers disappear into the crowd.
I didn't even want to come here.
So pretty.
Rin stood on the beach and she gazed at the spectacles in the water. Dozens of masts jutted from the water like palm trees, and each of them had small sails attached to them. Just below the surface of the water were the outlines of boat-shaped pieces. Numerous merpeople swam in the water or treaded in small groups. Their bodies were covered in colorful fish scales. They had arms and upper bodies similar to above-water Aoela, and they had colorful hair as well. Just as she imagined, the merpeople had large, powerful tails. The colors of the fish scales were vibrant and diverse. Some of the merpeople were all one color, while others had patterns, stripes, or other combination of hues. Suddenly, one of the merpeople regarded her and then swam up to the shore. Rin's heart thudded in her chest, and she took soft steps up to this beautiful creature as it crawled up to lay on the sand. The merperson sat upright and then smiled up at Rin as she stopped right beside them. Their body was mostly bright pink, with swirling lines of purple and deep blue running up the sides of their lower body. The deep blue and purple swirled around their waist and up their ribcage, stopping just under the armpits. Their hands were webbed. Bright pink hair flowed off of their head, and a pair of sparkling, vibrant purple eyes focused on Rin. When they did, Rin's veins felt a little more hot and intense. The merperson smiled, and a quiver wiggled up Rin's spine.
First time?
I'm sorry. First time?
Seeing one of our kind? You have that really adorable transfixed look. I never get tired of seeing it.
The merperson patted the sand beside them, and Rin felt compelled to sit beside them. She tucked some of her hair behind her ear and shrugged a little.
Oh, yes. I've never seen a merperson before. I'm Rin, by the way.
Rin, huh? That's a pretty name. My name is Alcuvo, and by the way, well, you're not wrong with calling us mer people. We actually have a different name we call ourselves.
Thank you. And your name is way prettier. Alcuvo. Alcuvo. What do you call yourselves?
We are the Siretasi.
Siretasi. Wow, another beautiful word. This trip is already turning out to be so incredible. So, are you all going on the voyage too?
Alcuvo held up their left hand. A black band had been tattooed near their wrist.
Yes, we are. I suppose you've never seen one of our subcanoes, huh?
The Siretasi pointed toward one of the sails emerging from the water.
When our ancestors first created the Voyage of the Great Navigators, we, the Siretasi, wanted to participate too. Rather than use the sort of canoes your kind use, our most intelligent and cunning builders came up with our subcanoes. They're designed for us to ride them while underwater, and they don't drag on the big sail like you'd imagine it might. Would you like to know a little secret?
Sure. I'd love to know one.
I'll totally be mad if you tell. We compensate for the slower speed of the subcanoe by sticking our tails out and swimming hard. It gives us a speed boost.
Wow, that's so interesting. I never thought I'd see an actual Siretasi. I'm from the Shanado Islands.
Really? I've heard of those islands, but I've never been to that part of the sea. Yet. My village is obviously underwater and near the Fanatu Island, about 50 miles south of it.
Wow, so what are the Siretasi villages like? Are they on the bottom of the sea?
As a matter of fact, they are. When Sudaiba first transformed our people into the Siretasi, she gave us many wonderful things to help us thrive. One of them was the knowledge of how to make magical glass and bricks from the sand and mud of the sea floor. We have brick and glass huts that form great villages. I think my village has 5,000 Siretasi living in it.
5,000 in one village?
A great village, but yeah, there are about a dozen great villages all over the bottom of the sea.
Wow, and I thought the Shanado had the biggest population. That's amazing. So what's it like living underwater? Is it hard to find food, or is it ever crowded? I hope I'm not bothering you with all these questions.
Alcuvo grinned widely, shifted the way they were sitting, and then repositioned their hands too. One of them rested on top of Rin's, and she felt her fingers press a little deeper into the wet sand. A heat flared up in her cheeks, and yet she smiled back at the Siretasi. As Alcuvo told her about their home under the sea, Rin never lost her smile. Just as they had been instructed, Rin, Lycos, and Masida had collected with the other Voyagers in a large open area before a raised platform. The area was right beside the sea, so the Siretasi could also attend the opening ceremonies. Several of the servants of the Voyage were standing on the stage, and they all had completed tattoos on their arms. Rin swirled the spit in her mouth to ease the dryness that sprung up. One day, that would be her, a Great Navigator. She gazed around and beheld the vast number of Voyagers. By this point, they all had to have their first tattoos. They were like her, dreamers and hopefuls who yearned for that esteemed title. They would all sail beyond the horizon. No one said anything, and they all watched the raised stage. Lycos and Masida gazed off into nothingness, perhaps peering into their own minds. What sort of thoughts buzzed around their heads? They both appeared troubled, or perhaps weighed down with heavy ponderings. It was easy to understand. Rin also squirmed under the weight of her own destiny. Did she have the strength to see this through to the end? Her grandma managed to overcome all the odds to become a great navigator. Her father, on the other hand, couldn't make it to the end. Whom would she take after when it was all said and done? One of the servants of the Voyage stepped forward and held up an ornate staff with a circular headpiece. The headpiece had colored feathers attached to it, much like the headdresses the servants wore. He was an older man, yet not so old to be considered an elder. Even from this distance, Rin saw the thick gray streaks in his long black hair.
Once upon a time, our ancestors sailed from the first island in search of brand new homes. Unlike you and the many Voyagers who came before you, our ancestors didn't know where they were going, only that the horizon called to them. To honor their journey, we step away from the shores we know, so that we may discover what lies beyond the edge of our perception.
Rin had heard the old legends before about how 5 tribes of the Aoela set out from the mystical first island in hopes to build new communities. A small sphere of chilly energy rippled up from her chest like a jellyfish.
My name is Kohanamo, and I am the preserver of the Voyage. What does it take to be a Voyager, and ultimately a Great Navigator? It requires someone to have immense fortitude, unshakable hope, fierce cunning and intelligence, fluid adaptability, and focused courage. You will leave the sacred island of New Beginnings and venture to all the islands in the Aoela Nation.
Kohanamo held up his right hand and showed the complete Great Navigator tattoo. 2 black bands wrapped around the arm, one at the wrist and the other closest to the elbow. Between them were 5 bands with unique designs, obtained on the other islands.
Upon arriving at each of the islands, the Valdo Islands, the Isiba Island, the Fanatu Island, the Siratasi Island, and the Shenandoah Islands, you will be granted tattoos. Only with all 5 and the last black band to close your journey, may you carry the mantle of Great Navigator.
For a long moment, the preserver of the Voyage swept his gaze across the crowd.
The voyage of the Great Navigators is not something that should be undertaken with a light heart. You will be sailing away from safety into the unknown. You will be inviting challenge from unseen dangers, and many of them will be perilous. You will be exposing the most vulnerable parts of yourselves to destiny and fate. Not all who leave the sacred island of New Beginnings return. Harden yourselves for that, for the lost will be the most grievous of burdens etched upon those who become Great Navigators.
Rin peeked over at Lycos, and she had expected him to beam a brotherly glance of condescendence at her. But instead he stared down, and his eyes were still unfocused.
You are aware of the dangers, and yet here you are. The ancestors and the gods and goddesses smile upon you for your effort and your intent. By the power vested in me, I bless all of you and pray that you all have a meaningful experience. The voyage of the Great Navigators will shape you in ways you can't fathom. Should you return to the sacred island of New Beginnings, you will begin your lives as Great Navigators, not just of the seas, but of your own destinies. Go to your canoes, and may the wind favor you.
Kalhanamos slammed the end of his staff against the stage, and then gestured with his hand pointing toward the sea. Other Voyagers moved toward the beaches, but Rin stayed behind. Masita and Lycos did the same. A few other groups also lingered about.
I figured it would be very congested to try and leave with everyone else. This isn't a race, and so I think we'll be okay to let them clear the shores a bit.
Yeah, you're probably right. There's probably going to be at least a dozen Voyager teams who are going to try and beat out one another.
Lycos frowned a little, and then he turned to Rin. The glimmer in his eyes reverberated a sort of unbreakable robustness. Rin stepped back away from him, and she frowned slightly herself.
Lycos, are you feeling okay?
This is going to be a very dangerous experience, one where any of us could die. But I know it's important to you. More important than anything else. I promise. I promise that no matter what we face, I'll make sure you both make it back safely, even if that means I have to die.
Rin placed a finger on his lips, and she glared hard at him.
Don't you even finish that sentence. We're all going to make it back safely. I really do appreciate you, big brother. I promise I'll do my best not to be as reckless as I have been in the past.
Not as reckless, so a little reckless?
Masita stepped forward and wrapped an arm around Rin's shoulder.
Of course she's going to be a little reckless. She's my best friend after all. Rin wouldn't be Rin if she didn't have a little chaotic boldness. Enough gabbing, let's get our canoe! This voyage isn't going to start itself.
Rin smiled broadly as she followed Lycos and Masita down to where their canoe was. Many of the other Voyagers were already in the ocean, sailing away toward their first island destination, the Valdo Islands. She and her brother pushed the canoe out, and soon they were off as well. It had really begun. Rin was officially a Voyager.